Vertical farming is something that has gained a lot of traction in the last couple of years. It's because that there is another way and a new way of growing plants, growing food in a sustainable way and while making a profit. So that's basically what vertical farming is. And what we saw is that we saw a lot of these companies going and getting many millions in funding and then taking those millions, making a production that is completely automated and then figuring that the money they spend will maybe be made back in 20 years. So the return of investment is really long because you spend too many millions on automated machinery that is not that profitable in the end. So a lot of companies are learning that automation doesn't equal success in a vertical farming setup. And we are seeing this right now, that the vertical farming bubble is like popping right now because a lot of companies are either going bankrupt or they are being taken over by other companies that are strong and that can maintain the position in the marketplace. In this video, I am going to tell you a lot about what we are doing, what our thought processes are, and how we are trying to minimize risk and maximize the profit that we are getting out of the facility that we are having here. So there's going to be a lot of gold nuggets for you to take home and think about, and it's going to be a lot of value that we have learned over the last 5 years of growing from small space into a big space like this, growing microgreens, herbs, mushrooms, shiso. Yeah, so I will give you a lot of really good value in the video. In the end of the video, I'm going to show you a little clip about something that we are not, we can't show yet, but I'm going to show it anyway, so you can see what we are also working with. As you can see here, the way that we chose to build our facility is that we are on the countryside right now. If you look over here, you can see a field of corn growing. So this is basically the traditional way of farming. And we have built this facility 15 minutes south of a city called Odense. That means that we can produce everything in here and in the containers in the back with a low rent. And then we can transport the goods to Odense to be redistributed from there. So that really works in our model. We don't like to go into the big city because the big city usually have really high rent and that kills the business before it takes off. So if you want to grow a vertical farm, best to find some cheap space to rent, maybe buy, and then build your facility there. This is a tray of rose and radish, so this is like pink radish. Here we have some trays of nasturtium, we have some trays of peas that we didn't sell. Over here we usually have a cart where we are throwing things away. So when you are building or operating a vertical farm, there will be some waste naturally, and that's almost impossible to not throw away because you want to maintain your quality as high as possible. So that means that something like this you cannot sell. It's just you have to decompose it and then get away with it as fast as possible. So when it's a vertical farm and you are growing local produce, then you have an easier job of making sure that you don't throw that much waste out, because you can always find someone who can either compost it and use it for nutrition on the field, or they can use it for many other things. Animal feed. There's a lot of different possibilities to use this for, but we are taking this up and then we are basically decomposing it. We have a container here that we are filling up, and then at the end of the lot, then there is a huge compost pile. So whenever we have some product that we want to throw out, instead of just throwing it in the garbage bin, we are decomposing it. And the decomposing the material after the compost we're making out of it, we are using for soil amendments. So in that way, it's a full circular. Of course, when you are growing any kind of produce, it's gonna be a problem that you have products that don't last long, and that's gonna be an issue for you. If you are building a vertical farm, you can build it fairly close to the big city, and in that way reduce the amount of produce that you are throwing away. So we want to make sure that we throw as little away as possible, but it is impossible to not throw any waste. So yeah, we are doing the best we can, but of course we are losing some money on that. The way we solve this issue of having waste is that we are selling the product that we have in spare to private people. Usually we only selling to restaurants, catering companies, but we are selling the leftovers to the private people here in the community. And that means that we can really work on reducing food waste and reducing the energy that goes into all the food that we produce, because if we produce too much food and we throw it all away, then it's basically a waste of energy. So that's also something really important when you are running your own vertical farm, that you don't want too much waste. You want a stable quality in a vertical farm, and by maintaining a stable quality, you are reducing the amount of waste that you are gonna make in your farm. That's a really important truth, because that if you don't know how to work well with your crops and you are growing them in a bad way, produce a nice quality, and then the customers will buy more from you, so you will reduce your waste, and that is the best way to do it, because reduced waste, local produce, that's the way forward. So the way that our concept works and the way that we are thinking is that we want to think globally and act locally. So we want to build a repertoire globally, but we are acting locally. Yeah. So the really important thing about vertical farming, almost the most important thing, is that the energy consumption, because you are competing with greenhouses that are basically producing produce almost for free in energy consumption in the summertime. So you want to make sure that you are reusing all the energy that you can. So you want to use the most efficient LED lights, because you want to reduce the amount of energy you put into your system as much as possible. Especially with the crisis that we are in right now with the rising electricity costs. A lot of vertical farming companies have gotten a lot of funding, but they are spending the funds in a really bad way. So that means that they are using funds to go into a country and then build up a facility and then figure, oh, the market didn't work there, so we are taking everything down and moving out of the country again. A lot of the big players are losing a lot of money this way. So you want to make sure that your energy is your most important factor, so you can really reduce the costs of operation. Because you don't want to scale up and build a facility and then figure that you can't afford to do the operational costs, you can't afford to pay the electricity bills. Those are the highest costs in a vertical farm, the investment of the lights and then the electricity bill. To talk a little about the lights, we are cooperating with Paris LED in the LED lighting, and then we want to make sure that the LED lights that you are using in your vertical farm is the most efficient setup that you can use. You can buy some cheap lights, and then you can buy them for 1/6 of a price of a commercial quality light, but the cheap light will really be degrading its efficiency within half a year to a year, while the commercial light will last at least 5 to 7 years of continuous use. So normally we see that the commercial, the China grade lights, they are having 20,000 light hours in them before that they are completely useless. The commercial high grade, high quality lights, they have at least 50,000 hours of work time before they start degrading, and they are starting to degrade very slow compared to the cheap lights. So that's something that's really important when you are considering growing vertical, because the energy consumption is really something that's gonna either make or break you in the end. Another very important part of vertical farming success is to make sure that you are propagating the right way. So you want to propagate as many plants in as little space as possible, using as little energy as possible, because then you can take the small plants and repot them into a system like this, so that you always have plants ready for the next flush. So you always have a schedule about what you are going to grow and how you're growing it, to make sure that you have your stable quality and your stable consistency of produce all the time. That's one of the main advantages of vertical farming, that you can have a produce that is available all year round, all the time, whenever you want and need it, because it's hyperlocally. It is possible to produce hyperlocally, so you can really make a product that no one else is gonna be able to do on the outside fields. I promised some of you that I would make a video about the pasteurization process, and I will just give you a little teaser about what is to come, because as you can see here, this is basically how we're doing it. So I'm gonna go into the technical details in the future in another video, but we are pasteurizing all the bags for the mushroom in there. So this looks like this. So the containers, both of them are completely empty almost. Right now in here we are waiting for the second flush, so we can decompose the bags afterwards and get a new flush running in here. So we are putting these bags are made in the pasteurization chamber, and then we are mixing them with high quality spawn for the oyster mushrooms. We have some testing going on king oysters, and we just finished some successful tests of the lion's mane. So that's gonna come in the future as well. But yeah, basically this is the container. If you want to see more about something like this, then you can see the container series that we did with the how to grow mushrooms in here. The way that we set these 3 containers up is that the 2 of the containers are growing oyster mushrooms. We are taking all the air from the inside production, the humid, hot air, and blowing it out in these 2 containers to always get a fresh intake of air. So in those 2 we are growing mushrooms, and in the last one we're growing the herbs, the basil, the parsley, and then we're doing some salad tests on a system in there as well. This system is completely enclosed, so there is no air in or out. It's only a closed environment where we are cooling the container down. It's a naturally insulated container, so it really keeps the temperature and the humidity in there, inside. So we are growing microgreens in a vertical farm. We're growing mushrooms, we're growing herbs. And the truth about growing microgreens, herbs versus mushrooms is that I think there's a lot of people thinking mushrooms is a really good business, and it's the return of investment is really high, and the time that it takes to gain your capital back is really low. But that's true if you know what you're doing. But if you don't know what you're doing and you have no experience in growing mushrooms, it's going to take you at least 1 to 2 years before you are even having your first profitable month. And yeah, in that sense, it should be something that you build up slowly instead of something that you invest everything you got into and then go all in. It's better to build it up slowly, build up some reputation, build up some really good habits about how you're doing things and how you're communicating with the chefs that you are working with and cooperating with. The most important thing about this, like the container setup, is that it's a cheap way for us to build extra grow space. So if we had more space inside the hall, we would maybe have just built rooms in there. But since we can just put a container up here, we would rather do that for mushrooms, because if we are getting to a point where there's going to be a lot of mold inside the container, then we can just like flush everything down and then just put like chlorine all over and then clean it completely. Then if we would have built a room with wood, then there would be like black mushrooms all over the room, and it would completely destroy the building. So if you are going to grow mushrooms, I would recommend growing it in a shipping container, and then making sure that you have everything you need inside a room, so you can work with making the bags, making the spawn, putting the spawn and the bags together, making sure that everything is completely sealed. So that's something that you need to keep in mind if you want to grow mushrooms. And if you want to grow mushrooms and microgreens together, I think that's the best symbiosis, because you can really get some advantages of getting the air from the microgreen production and then reusing it in the mushrooms. So you don't have to, at any point in time in the year, heat up the facility, because you have all the heat and all the really nice oxygenated air inside the container all year round. Welcome, we are in a new room that we've built, and we are growing something that you might know what is. So this is basically shiso leaves we are growing right now and testing to see if this is something that's doable. I don't know yet, but we are gonna figure that. We are gonna make a video purposely only from inside here in the future, but that's gonna come. So if you are interested in something like this, looking and seeing more what this is about, then subscribe to the channel, and then you're gonna get a notification whenever you are gonna see that we put up this video about how to grow these awesome plants inside a vertical farm.